Hey guys, so we're back. Um, this week we're talking about Nathaniel Hawthorne, so I'm going to share this so you don't have to stare at me the whole time. That's Nathaniel Hawthorne. Very famous, one of America's most famous writers, writing in the 1800s. I think he died around 1864. Young Goodman Brown's one of his most famous. Hawthorne was born in Salem, Massachusetts. So if you know anything about that city, you know it's got a unique history with the Salem witch trials, which is one of the, I think, more infamous examples of groupthink that we've ever seen, and the way that crowds, the madness of crowds, perhaps you could say, people kind of lost their minds and started believing that everybody in the town were witches, and people were burned at the stake over it. Hawthorne's great grandfather was actually one of the judges that presided over that, so that kind of haunted him most of his life. And so most of his stories deal with the Puritan background that his family had. And if you know anything about the Puritans, they were very interesting people. Their form of Christianity was very much based on works, not so much on faith. I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but that's kind of how it played out. So their societies kind of turned into these places where people were very suspicious of one another, and that your outward appearance and your outward behavior was extremely important, probably almost too important. And so a lot of Hawthorne stories are trying to wrestle with that legacy and deal with it. They deal with they're sort of morality tales that deal with some of these issues, and human nature is a big part of them, and believing that human nature is sinful or fallen and how we deal with that. So the Young Goodman Brown is an example of that. So the some other things to think about with Young Goodman Brown. I'm just going to go through this quickly. Um, so the story kind of takes place with him. He's living in this town with his wife Faith. So hopefully you pick up on the symbolism there. And he leaves his faith behind, right? And we don't really know why, but he's going into the forest. He's traveling into the forest. This is a famous metaphor from Christian Western mythology and stories about the character who enters the forest, or who leaves civilization to enter the wilderness, if you will. And this can be traced to the Bible with Jesus Christ and his 40 days in the wilderness and being tempted by Satan. This is also connected to Dante's Inferno. Um, his character wanders into the wilderness of sin. So the woods kind of have this. The forest has this sort of mythological aspect to it in Western culture, and I don't know that it's just solely Western culture. And I would say also that the woods are just a have always been a unique place for human beings, right? It's a place that we kind of escape to experience maybe a more simple form of existence, but they're also can be kind of disturbing, right? If you've ever been in the forest, and I mean like a forest where you can't see anything but trees in the middle of the night, it can be quite disturbing to be there by yourself, or to just be surrounded by the sounds and the shadows and what have you. So he enters into this forest. He goes on this journey. Along the way, he meets the old man. He meets the old woman, Goody Cloyce, and then he sees the two travelers. The old man here is sort of a devil figure. If you didn't pick up on that, he's supposed to be Satan, who's tempting young Goodman Brown. And then he finds out that Goody Cloyce, who taught him his catechism, is actually going to this prayer meeting that seems to have some nefarious purposes. And then the two travelers he sees are the minister and the deacon, I think, and they're also on their way to this prayer meeting where they're going to induct members into this sort of this evil sort of some kind of evil ritual. And so he ends up there. He sees his wife there, and he has this whole transformative experience. And then, of course, he wakes up at the end, And we don't really know if it happened or not. We don't know if he was just hallucinating this or if this was something that actually happened to him, but he's forever changed by it, right? And so the story ends with Hawthorne writing, had Goodman Brown fallen asleep in the forest and only dreamed a wild dream of a witch meeting? Be it so, if you will, but alas, it was a dream of evil omen for young Goodman Brown, a stern, a sad, a darkly meditative, a distrustful, if not a desperate man did he become from the night of that fearful dream. On the Sabbath day, when the congregation were singing a holy psalm, he could not listen because an anthem of sin rushed loudly upon his ear and drowned all the blessed strain. When the minister spoke from the pulpit with power and fervent eloquence, and with his hand on the open Bible of sacred truths of our religion and of saint-like lives and triumphant deaths and of future bliss or misery unutterable, then did Goodman Brown turn pale, dreading lest the roof should thunder down upon the gray blasphemer and his hearers. Often waking suddenly at midnight, he shrank from the bosom of faith, and at the morning or eventide, when the family knelt down at prayer, he scowled and muttered to himself and gazed sternly at his wife and turned away. And when he had lived long and was borne to his grave, a hoary corpse, followed by faith, an aged woman, and children and grandchildren, a goodly procession, besides neighbors not a few, they carved no hopeful verse upon his tombstone, for his dying hour was gloom. And so that's kind of how the story closes there. And Hawthorne is basically telling us that Goodman Brown, it didn't really matter in the end whether that actually happened or not. It was the impact that he allowed to have on his life. So there's a lot of discussion here about the nature of reality and what reality is for us, and is it objective or subjective? That's certainly something that you could explore in this. What is the nature of evil? I know in the this week for the mini paper, I want to look at that very quickly because you guys should be working on those. The mini paper instructions are asking you about the nature of evil or faith and doubt, right? Do you believe that Goodman Brown experience in the forest reveals the true nature of those around him, or is it a manifestation of his own fears and insecurities? And that's probably the biggest theme here, is that fearful aspect to this. Do we allow what we see to dictate? Do we allow ourselves to become paranoid and suspicious of others, or do we live a life where we're trusting and faithful, right? And so that's one of the big messages here of young Goodman Brown is, what you see, what you believe is reality can often determine the course of your life, and it can determine the way that you interact with others. And so I'm curious to see what you guys will say about that. He allows fear to end up dictating his life, and fear, as we can see, can dominate and make people really nasty. I think we saw a very recent version of that during COVID, when people were so fearful of everything that was going on, and fearful of each other, and unwilling to trust, and unwilling to have faith. And that can create a society that's very suspicious, and doesn't work very well. So I think we have to be careful about that. So I'll be curious to see what you guys hear about this. This should lead us into another discussion for next week, which I believe next week, we're watching the Robert Eggers film, The Witch. So The Witch is set in the same time period as Young Goodman Brown. So I think it's a good lead in. And I want you guys to be thinking about, when you watch that film, is this, this sense of isolation that a lot of those people would have had, moving into the middle of the forest and trying to conquer it, essentially as pioneers and pilgrims, and what that might do to your psyche. So that's a good thing to think about. And it connects, I think, very solidly with Young Goodman Brown. So can't wait to see what you guys say. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.